Hello, my friends. So we are back again in our conversations with influencers and luminaries. And today it's my great joy and privilege to interview the author of this book, Soul Primer: Building Blocks of the Soul, Cate Schultz. Thanks for joining me, Kate.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so I've been enjoying your book, and I think it's very timely, especially at this time when we're kind of resetting ourselves. Humanity is on a reset, I think.
I agree. Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about your own life journey.
Okay. Um, well, first of all, I do want to thank you again for having me on. And I want to tell you, Deepak, that when I mentioned this interview with my friends, virtually every one of them had a story to tell of how you had influenced their life in one way or another through a talk or a book or something. So what a beautiful legacy. So honored to be here with you today. Okay, so my story, I'd like to say that I think I've always been a very spiritual person. At least according to my mom, when I was about 6 years old, I used to say, I want to die and go live with Jesus. And yes, we were raised Catholic, but I think that probably as the eighth of 12 children, that the beautiful angels and lovely harp music of heaven looked very appealing compared to the chaos of my large family life. Um, so I don't know if I was being spiritual or if I was just looking for some peace and quiet. But in any case, moving in with Jesus didn't seem to be happening. So I decided to set my sights on college instead. And I still remember my father shaking his head in dismay that I was departing for this bastion of dangerous humanism and this ivory tower of, amoral liberals. Those were literally his words. But I was undeterred. I knew I was going to college and I was saving my pennies because I knew that I had to pay my own way. So I was the only one of 8 daughters that went to college. And I graduated with degrees in English and French and education and immediately went into teaching. And of course, my parents had warned me not to take on too consuming of a career because a woman's most important job was always in her home with her husband and her children. And after 5 years of teaching, I did quit to stay home with my children for a few years. I have 3 beautiful sons, and those years at home with them were precious. It was also probably the hardest job I ever did. And so, kudos to all the mother goddesses out there. But I did eventually return to work, and I went from teaching to the business world. I owned and operated a multi-million-dollar medical equipment company for 20 years. And during 7 of those years, I also owned and operated an FAA flight school and air taxi company. I had learned to fly in my 40s, and it was something that I'd always wanted to do. It was in fact something that I've dreamed of since childhood, of flying actually like a bird. And one day I looked in the mirror and I said, you're not getting any younger. When are you going to go follow this dream of yours? And so I couldn't really turn into a bird, but I did the next best thing. I went to the local airport and took flying lessons. And 6 months after getting my private pilot's license, I decided to open a flight school on the airfield. Pretty much everyone told me that I was crazy. But it was highly successful, and it was a lot of fun, and it was really a huge growth opportunity for me as well. And one of the things that I realized that I loved about that was teaching women and teenagers to fly. And those are 2 sectors of our society that I think, are often to feel like they don't have control over their lives. And it was very interesting to see how learning to fly became a portal for them to learn how to step into their own power. So that was great. During that time, I also got my instrument and commercial licenses. And then in 2011, 2012, I had this huge awakening. And I ended up getting out of my marriage of 25 years. I ended up selling my businesses. And after 40 years in the work desert, I decided I was done with the 9 to 5 or in my case, it was sometimes 5 to 9 grind. I was done with that. So I decided to focus on another life love of mine, which is writing. And I published my first book in 2013. It is a legal light mystery, which is also a story of empowerment. I'll just show it to you, Silent Sky. And it was meant to be the first in a series, but I didn't write the sequel, and I still have readers asking about it. But the thing is that my awakened self was becoming aware that I had something else to do in this world. And I realized that I needed to help others awaken. So I decided to get my life coaching certificate, and I started life coaching. And meanwhile, during this time, I was meditating a lot and writing a lot. But I could see how, my life had, blossomed really like a lotus flower. And I could see how other people were suffering and struggling needlessly, really. So in 2017, in December of 2017, I had a dream. And in that dream, I felt the need to relieve myself. So I went into the bathroom. And when I got into the bathroom, I realized that I didn't have to go to the bathroom. I had to give birth. So I climbed into the tub, as I guess you do in a dream if you have to give birth. And when I looked up, there was a red fox sitting on the floor looking at me. And then I woke up. And it was a short dream. It wasn't complicated, but it felt really powerful. So as I was lying in bed that morning thinking, boy, what's with that dream? And what's with the red fox? I've done years of studying shamanism because I was interested in the ancient cultures and ancient wisdoms. And I know that in shamanism, they believe that animals are the link between the spirit world and the physical world. And so when that red fox appeared in my dream, I wondered what the red fox meant. What's red fox medicine? What does that mean to me? Well, as I'm lying in bed thinking of that, I have a vision that pops into my mind, and it is a vision of a white tree of life. It's a vision that I'd had 5 years ago, and it popped into my mind as if I was seeing it for the first time that day, as clear as it was 5 years ago. And it was a vision of a white tree of life on sort of a magical green sky background. There was an infinity symbol in the trunk, and there was an empty white wood sign hanging from one of the branches. And for some reason, I knew that those two things were connected, but I didn't know how. Well, 2 months later, or not 2 months, I'm sorry, 2 weeks later, I started writing Soul Primer. And it took me 2 years to finish putting this whole project together. And when I was about a year into it, I was putting together the cover, and as I thought about that, the dream of the red fox and the vision of the white tree of life popped into my mind again. And I thought, I never did look up what the red fox means in, shamanic medicine. And so I looked it up, and I learned that when a red fox appears to you, it is a calling to the creative feminine energies. And it is a reminder of how the creative process can positively impact a shape-shifting world. So I knew I had my cover there. And fortunately, I had an artist who was willing to paint this. I have 3 artists that contributed a third each of the art in this book. And one of them, Judith Shaw from Albuquerque, was willing to paint my dream and vision into this book that we're looking at today. So that's kind of my story from the age of 6 to today.
It's a great story, and it's a great book because in alphabetical order, you actually outline the most important qualities of what you call spirit or awareness or consciousness. And I recommend this book very highly to everyone who's watching us. We can't go into all the letters of the alphabet right now, but what I'd like to do is address 3 things, since you mentioned shamanism, and I was, randomly going through your book. 2 things that we can talk about, maybe 3 things.
Okay.
So presence powerfully impacts our lives. Please explain, what is presence? and how does it powerfully impact our lives?
Well, presence really is being just mindful of the moment and living in the moment, which most of us have a very hard time doing because we're so busy recalling the past or looking and using actually the evidence of the past to indicate what the future is going to hold for us. So we're constantly thinking about the past and the future and not being focused in the moment. And it's interesting. I read once somewhere that the biggest reason a woman will leave a man in a relationship is because lack of presence, because they don't feel like they're being seen, they don't feel like they're being heard. And so, I think it's just being there in the moment for the person.
So, as I've looked at this whole idea um, all my life, um, at least I've convinced myself that there is no such thing as a present moment, that moments are concepts in time, that presence itself is not in time, and that when we say presence, it doesn't refer to the moment, but the awareness in which the moment arises and subsides, or the momentary experience arises and subsides. The experience is always now, but we kind of give it a conceptual notion that there was a past or the present. But if you ask me right now, this particular now is unique. It's never happened in the history of the universe. It'll never again happen in the history of the universe. I'm experiencing now, as are you, but the experience you're having now is obviously not exactly the same as the experience I'm having now, or all the people who are watching us are having now. So we are each constructing an experience, and that which is constructing the experience, what we call presence, is not in time. In fact, this moment, if you want to call it that, if you want to call this now, has no memory,
Mm.
has no memory. Now has no memory, right?
I agree with you. I mean, I think
Therefore, let me finish. If now
sure.
has no memory, then there has never been a past or never will be a future.
Yeah.
It's only now, right?
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we use the understood terms, I guess, to explain something, so we talk about the past, we talk about the present, but really, it's really just our awareness of of what is, of what appears to be anyway to us. It's our consciousness and our awareness of this moment. And most of us, I think we just don't have that awareness or that consciousness to pay attention to what is, because we are worried about these constructs, like you say, of the past and the future that actually don't even matter, really. Um, you know, in uh, in shamanism, I had a shaman once explain. It was, first of all, the first precept of shamanism is that the world is what you think it is. And I was trying to get that explained to me by a shaman years ago. And he said, well, the world is like a game. It's a game board that we've all agreed to the rules of. So he said, like, for example, if you're playing chess, you all agree to the rules that this, the queen moves every direction, the knight has to move in an L shape. And, but it works because we've all agreed to it. But we could all change the rules. We could all agree to different rules and say the queen doesn't move that way and the knight doesn't move. The bishop moves every direction and the king can go anywhere he wants. So it's a matter of explaining things by the understood, I guess, rules of the game. But I agree with you. I mean, really, there's nothing different than just being aware of exactly what is.
So you just said the world is what we think of it, which is actually very good because everything we perceive, we have given all the meaning to everything that we perceive and created the rules and regulations of it. So that's a very important insight. And that actually brings me to my second thing I wanted to ask you, and that is identity. So,
Uh,
one of the practices that I have at night is I recapitulate my life, and I can go back pretty far. Okay. I can go back to when I was 5 years of age or even younger, sitting in my mother's lap, smelling her skin, hearing her voice, singing to me, very present. And then I can look at other aspects of my life, like when I was a teenager or medical school, smoking cigarettes, all kinds of things. And so I don't relate to those people. I don't relate to this kid who was struggling in school with mathematics, or I don't relate to the nervous teenager that was embarrassed about, social nuances. Um, what is identity then? I mean, who is it that is watching this changing experience of body, mind, and world appearance? Is it just presence is the only identity? All these other identities are provisional?
well, I mean, I guess we call it ego, right? We call it an ego that is all these things that we've constructed about ourselves. My story that I just told, and your experiences that you just mentioned. And it's stuff that's. I mean, I don't know how much of the book you've read, but basically, my belief is that we are perfect. Beings of the cosmos or the universe, that we are basically sparks of the universe. We're sparks of the universe. We're pieces of light of the universe, but we're put into this human body here. At least that's what our experience maybe has led us to believe. And then stuff is piled on top of us, that we're this or we're that, or we're a Catholic, or we're a Jew, or we have our teachers teach us, and our parents teach us, and our siblings and our friends create this identity that we think is us, that we think defines us, and it really doesn't.
But
It's
this ego identity that we relate to um, is not is fluctuating, right? My ego identity when I was a kid is not the same as my ego identity now. So, what is observing this ego identity, if not presence?
well, I remember hearing Wayne Dyer say that and I think it was a quote from someone else, and that he was recounting, but it was that the only thing that's real is that which doesn't change. And so, our bodies and our identities, like you said, from being a child to a teenager to an adult, that's changing, which indicates that it's not real. It's really just, it's part of the game that we're playing. But what's real is that unchanging part of us and again, people give it different names. Is it our spirit? Is it our consciousness? Is it, is it that spark of the universe that is, our soul? I guess the other word for it is soul. What are your thoughts?
You see, I come from a tradition where we use the word existence rather than the word reality. Because when we start talking about reality, then there's mental reality, there's perceptual reality, there's images, feelings, thoughts. Um, they're all part of existence. So anything that appears on the screen of consciousness or awareness, which is synonymous, I think, with presence,
Mhm.
anything that appears on that is part of existence. Thoughts are part of existence. Feelings are part of existence. Imagination is part of existence. Creativity is part of existence. Inspiration is part of existence. Telling stories, creating models, writing books, all of that is existence. But who or what is having the experience of existence? And, in the tradition I come from, there's no real thing called mind or body or universe. It's all fluctuating presence. So presence or consciousness or awareness, or if you want soul, is fluctuating, and the it's an intermittent stream of fluctuations of vibrations, if you want to call it, that appear at a very subtle level as thoughts and images and feelings and emotions, and at a gross level appear as the changing physical body and the changing physical world, but actually they're all made of the same stuff. And that stuff is not stuff. It is formless. It has no form. And having no form, it has no boundaries. And having no boundaries, it is infinite. So everything that we see, whether it's a book or this, or my hand, or the Milky Way galaxy, is the infinite being appearing as that. And so when it comes to identity, then there's only one identity, and that's presence. Everything is a fluctuation. And when we get that, then I think those shamanic principles become obvious, because right now, as we interpret the world as physical, which it is not. It's a fluctuation of perceptions, which are modifications of presence. If we interpret the world as physical, then we have all these dilemmas. What happens after we die? Is there extrasensory perception, precognition, remembrance of other lifetimes, clairvoyance, out of body experiences, remote healing? Which people claim to have, and many have had. There are millions of people who've had these experiences. But current science, which is based on a physicalist ontology, which means that the world is physical, is actually unable to explain any of these experiences. In fact, discounts these experiences. So, in the wisdom tradition that I come from, all our problems are a result of misperception. All our problems, including the fear of death. Then in the tradition again of non-duality, there are 5 causes of human suffering. First is not knowing who we are. Second is grasping and clinging at fluctuating experience, which is transient, ephemeral, evanescent, ungraspable. Third is recoiling from the same experience when we don't like it. The fourth is identifying with this hallucination that we call the ego. And the fifth is the fear of death. But they're all based on A, provisional identity, and B, lack of presence, period. So everything you write about in this book is actually very true. But to me, those two were pivotal points: understand identity,
Mhm.
understand presence, and then you do understand everything else that you talk about in this book, because none of these qualities are actually physical attributes of the universe. None of these
Mhm.
physical attributes of the universe. In fact, there is no such thing as a physical attribute of the universe. It's a human interpretation of fluctuating vibrations that we call sensations, perceptions, images, feelings, thoughts. To really understand this through this kind of vocabulary could be our ticket to freedom. So that's why I want to thank you for writing it.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know if you read U is for Universe, but it kind of touches on what you're talking about. And I recently led a group of 20 women through this book for over the 26 weeks, which is 6 months. And U is for Universe is the most abstract, and it was kind of mind-boggling to them. But in that page, it talks about how actually Marcus Chown, who's a quantum physicist, he says that if you took all of the human race and you compressed all of the emptiness out of it, and just kept the protons, neutrons, and electrons, and compressed everything else out of it, he said what was left would fit into the size of a sugar cube. So really we're really just emptiness. We're that consciousness, that awareness, that energy, really. And I like to think of it as like emptiness dancing. I mean, we're just, our reality is like the thinnest little filigree, that we think is us, but we're really emptiness. And we all share that, and we flow. I mean, when I die, I've never worried. I mean, I've always had an unusual a perception of death, and it's hard when people are really devastated when someone dies. I said, well, they're really just, it's just a threshold. That's just, that body is going back into the earth, and, it's going to be made into something else. But that energy, that emptiness, that consciousness, whatever it is, it's just, merging with the rest of consciousness.
It's
So it's
time-
abstract, but
it's timeless. Yeah,
yeah,
emptiness is formlessness,
yeah,
and then everything that is formed is modified formlessness. Even that sugar cube that you speak of, which is the total density of the physical universe, is actually modified emptiness. It's made out of the same emptiness as the rest of the universe.
right.
Well, I think this has been a very useful conversation, and I thank you for writing this book, because this is the way to start opening ourselves to existence, which is the same as awareness of existence, because
Yeah.
the two go together. If there was no awareness of existence, then there's no existence. So, awareness, existence, truth, beauty, harmony, fundamental reality, formlessness are all you
Yeah.
and me.
Well, can I share with you really my vision as it's developed with this book?
Please.
I mean, I originally wrote it to help people live trouble-free lives, on the micro scale anyway. And but on the macro scale, I did write it to change the world. And I do believe that, really no government plan or new program or new regime is ever going to change our world. And it's going to take each of us changing and each of us transforming to create a sea swell of transformed individuals that will transform our world. So, of course, there's a lot of individuals that have to get transformed individually. So I've realized as I've started putting this book out there that it has really a larger scale. Now I have countless people that buy one and then come back to buy 3 or 6 or 12 for their sisters and cousins and brothers and whatever. And so, I'm starting to develop this vision of actually transforming the world, Deepak.
Why not? Because there's
And
no-
I think that it's us, it's the spiritual people who are the troops that have to make this happen, who have to take these skills and put them into the hand of the average man who doesn't have access to them, who hasn't started on that spiritual journey. So I want to put out a call out to your audience to really rise to that opportunity and to go forth and awaken the world. Use this toolbox if you want. It's just a toolbox or whatever, but and now is the time, like I think you started out this conversation by saying this is a good time. And, I imagine that we agree it's because we're in kind of the dark night of the soul here in our world. We're in this what I call the river of hurt, and we have to wade through it like I did when I did my big awakening in 2011, 2012. We have to wade through this river of hurt, and we have to bring as many people as we can to the other side, to bring them to this promised land. So, kind of
I'm,
like Joan of Arc, trying to rally the troops here.
I'm on board. There's no planetary transformation without personal transformation. So let's reach that critical mass.
Yes.
More peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Please check out this book, Soul Primer: Building Blocks of the Soul by Cate Schultz. Thank you, Kate, for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.